Today's topic is on the nature of chemistry, elements, and atoms. Pure substances are substances with a constant composition, and they can only be separated chemically. These can fall into two subgroups, elements and compounds. Elements can be broken down into simpler substances chemically, while compounds are just a group of elements. Elements consist of atoms, which is the smallest unit of matter that has the same properties as elements, and molecules, which are groups of the same atoms. Compounds are mixtures of elements. They can also be broken down into molecules with different elements and ions, or charged elements. For example, there are several molecules presented over here. The top row highlights molecules formed out of elements, and the bottom row highlights molecules formed out of different elements, so they are compounds. Notice that in the top row, the molecules consist of the same atom, which are why they are elements, such as hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and chlorine, while in the bottom row, the compounds are formed out of different elements, such as N and O, nitrogen and oxygen, to make nitrogen oxide, or more popularly, hydrogen and oxygen, which makes water. So what exactly are these atoms made out of? Well, atoms are consistent of neutrons, protons, and electrons. Neutrons are neutrally charged, as the name suggests, while protons have a positive charge, and electrons have a negative charge. Protons and neutrons make up the nucleus of the atom, which is basically the positive charge in the atom. This positive charge holds electrons in the rings around it. Because the positive nucleus attracts the negative charged electrons towards them, so the electrons form rings or orbits around the nucleus. There are 118 different elements on the periodic table, and 92 are found naturally. To read the periodic table, you will need to know that the elemental symbol is basically what element it is, while the atomic number, or proton number, which is basically the amount of protons in the element. It's termed Z by scientists. The bottom number is atomic mass, which is measured in atomic mass units, or daltons. And those are basically the number of protons and neutrons in the element. Notice for this element, helium, that helium has 2 protons, as said by the proton number, and its atomic mass is 4. So, since it's 4, its atomic mass, you can subtract 2 protons from that to get 2 neutrons. Elements can be charged to form something called ions. When an atom loses energy, it becomes a positive ion, and when an atom gains electrons or energy, it becomes a negative ion. Why is this? Well, electrons are negatively charged, so if you take an electron away from a substance, it becomes positively charged. If you add an electron or a negative charge to something neutral, it becomes a negatively charged ion. Scientists today use something called a mass spectrometer to measure the different types of ions and elements of substance. What they do is they put in a specimen into the source and beam it with an ionic beam or an electronegative beam to separate the substance into its different elements. Then they measure the amount of elements through a magnet and find out the percentage of different elements in the compound. For example, you could take CO2 and put it in the source, and then charge it with an ionic beam. That would separate the CO2 into carbon and oxygen. And then you would take a magnet and deflect the different elements in the compound to see that there's a lot more oxygen in CO2 than carbon. So anyways, this is called mass spectrometry. Moving on. Sometimes positively charged ions or negatively charged ions are radioactive, meaning that they emit electrons and are unstable. You can calculate the half-life of a radioactive element by this formula. Simply take the initial amount and multiply it times a half to the power of the time over the half-life, and you will get your final amount.